Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Jasmine Green tea. I do tend to like my green teas floral. And this is from Upton, which I've had for a while, which means I really gotta get to finishing a lot of the teas that I own. And then maybe do another tea haul, but not quite yet. Anyway, I thought I would do a little reading update, a kind of mid-month wrap-up situation. I haven't finished a lot of books in the month of, what month is this? August. Mainly because I was coming off of Jane Austen July. I did a lot of reading in July, which was wonderful, but now August is a combination of still wanting to read some Jane Austen things, but also getting in the mood for autumn and wanting all the things that are associated with autumn in my reading, and a number of other things. So I have picked up so many books in the past few weeks. Out of interest in all of these books, some of the books that are on my TBR, some books that I was just holding off on reading for a while, and etc. And I am in like 50, 100 pages in a lot of books right now. So I haven't been finishing a lot. I'm all over the place. That's okay. September is a semi cleanup month for me, in which I usually only semi, how many times am I going to say semi? I might participate in some things, but I mostly do clean up before October. So I have time to finish a lot of things, but I thought I'd talk about the two books that I did finish in the month of August so far. And the first one is The Mayfair Bookshop by Eliza Knight. Sounds like a very Jane Austen name. I think I said that last time. I don't know why all my books tend to be getting folded in the same spots. I think that's a problem with the way I carry them. I'm going to have to start using book pouches, but I don't have any. So anyway, this was a pretty good book. I tend to be drawn to books about books and books about writers and books about bookshops. So this is up my alley-ish. Also, it takes place mostly in London, which is very much a Catherine favorite. And as you can see from the cover, the back of somebody surrounded by books, looking out at London. I think it's supposed to be Nancy Mitford, but from the way it's dressed, she is dressed, which would make sense. So this is a dual timeline thing, which I like and don't like sometimes, because usually you prefer one timeline to another. This one was between the life of Nancy Mitford, from her point of view, from around the time right before she got married to a husband whom she really didn't have a very successful marriage with. I'm not saying she hated him, but it wasn't the best chosen marriage, I guess you could say. Best choice of a husband. He was a little bit of a not great with money, and he had affairs, etc. Not great. So that was her life, and her writing career is covered a little bit. It really culminates in her writing The Pursuit of Love, which is the one that made her more than just a somewhat well-known writer into the more well-known writer that we know her to be now. Not everybody, but and also her relationship with her sisters. I am very much curious now to read more. I have a couple of books in the Mitford Mysteries, which Jessica Fellows, I think her name is, wrote and is currently writing. I think the series is continuing, and I haven't gotten to it yet. I meant to in May, so now I really want to get to that. And I also want to read. I have two books about the Mitford sisters, and I have a collection of their letters. But this is the one I've had, I think, longer. It's The Six by Laura Thompson. I am curious about this one, so it might be the one I pick up first. I think, is there a doggy in there? I think. This family. I mean, I know The Pursuit of Love was very loosely based on the family, but this was kind of intense in a lot of ways. They were a close-knit family. They grew up in relatively well off. Sometimes I know that Nancy's marriage, there were financial issues, but compared to a lot of people, especially in that time, the 30s and 40s, I mean, the fact that she could just get away to visit friends in country houses and France, etc., pretty often, is like, how badly off are you? But then again, it's hard to compare, finances of different people. But so they all went slightly different ways, but politically is the dramatic part of it, because Nancy herself, I don't think was as, I don't know. I haven't read all of her writings. I don't know how involved in politics she was, but at least two of her sisters, and it seems her mother, were quite sympathetic to the Nazi cause. One of her sisters was married to a well-known, I believe, English or British fascist, and one of her sisters not only had a crush on, but moved to Germany and became close to Hitler. Now I'm looking at the way my hair was parted, and I'm like, no, nothing to do with that. I just need a haircut really bad. um, and I'm not going to get a haircut for another month, so you're going to have to deal with straggly Catherine for a while. I apologize in advance. But anyway, but no, this is not really funny, actually, to me. This involvement was horrific, and reminds me too, though, because I remember watching Foyle's War, which I love that program, but there was a lot of people who are very pro-British, we gotta win and all that, patriotism or whatever. But, and I guess those are the people you're supposed to side with, but like, there were a lot of characters, and when the war had already started, World War II, I mean, when the country was fighting the Nazis, that were very, very anti-Semite, very, still pretty welcoming of maybe the Germans invading Britain. And that was much, to me, the Mitford family was like, almost like a demonstration of what was probably going on behind the scenes in England, that there were a lot of people who were very anti-Nazi, very anti-fascist, very not a fan of Hitler, and yet then there were other people who were very pro, and they could be in the same family. Very fascinating, frightening, but now I want to read more about this family. Now the book, as you can see, is called the Mayfair Bookshop, and you may say, well, you haven't really mentioned this bookshop. It's called Haywood Hill, right? Yes, I don't believe I've been to this one, so the next time I can finally get to London, I hope to. I think it's in Mayfair. Duh, it's in Mayfair, because that's what it's called. I promise you this is just tea. But I was a little disappointed, because I thought because I knew that Nancy Mitford worked in this bookshop at some point, and I thought there'd be more scenes of the bookshop and more bookishness, but that really the title is what connects the two characters in a different timeline. Lucy is the modern day main character who works with books, archiving, etc. I don't know that's the exact, what is her exact job? Book curator. But yeah, all in that bookish career business, kind of like what a lot of people who are into reading and books think of as a dream job, I guess. But she has a book. She's somewhat connected to Nancy Mitford by, in this story anyway, and a great uncle or something had a brief relationship with Nancy Mitford. I don't know if this person really existed. I didn't really look it up that much. But the point is, Lucy's American, and she has this opportunity. She has this book that's, I think, a first edition that is of Nancy Mitford's. That is that has an inscription to someone named Iris, and it's a mystery of who this person is. So Lucy has another responsibility, another job, which is what is sending her to this bookshop, the same bookshop, except I think the location's down the block now, or down the street. Sorry, and the so she has her own responsibilities, her own work that she's going to be doing, but her own behind the scene thing is to find out who this Iris was and how she was connected and find out her story. And it was interesting enough, although it takes a while to get to in the past, in Nancy Mitford's timeline, to figure out who this person is, and then it becomes quite obvious pretty quickly. But it does take a while before Nancy's working in the bookshop, and it's not that well covered. But I guess that's the title is what really connects these two for the most part. But Lucy, although the story's okay, she meets somebody and they go on dates and stuff, and she's loving her time in London. She gets to see all these wonderful bookish places. It's almost like her life and her plot is almost too easy. Like things just fall into place. I don't want to give away what happens, but for me, I felt like there was very little pushback in her life. Everything just, oh yeah, there we go. I'm not saying things are perfect. Her mother had just died recently and she was dealing with that. But I don't want people to suffer. I'm not saying that about this book, but it just seemed like when you get to her, you just felt like, all right, this is, I know what's going to happen. And then I was completely right about that. So, yeah. But I still thought it was good. It was a fun book. It was a quick read, a bookish book. Oh yeah, but one last thing. The other thing I didn't like about Lucy's story, again, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, was that there was like a constant repeating about, yes, I'm a bibliophile. Yes, I'm very bookish. Yes, we book lovers. Oh yes, book people like ourselves. It's like, all right, did you mention that you're interested in books? Okay, you know what I mean? It was like almost like we didn't need to hear it so many times. Like me saying, and like, how many times do you need to hear it? Moving on, another book that is kind of a bookish book, Sharon Hale's Austenland. So this was a little bit of a carryover from Jane Austen July that I kept seeing and saying, I don't want to take it back to the library yet. I want to read it. It's a library book, by the way. Both of these are library books. But I had seen the adaptation that had been done a number of years after this book, Austenland. So I knew basically what was going to happen, although there were a lot of changes. And they weren't bad changes for the film. I thought they worked, but it was just a slightly different premise. So in this situation, as opposed to the film wherein the main character Jane, yes, Jane, is an American who loves Pride and Prejudice, especially loves Jane Austen, but loves Pride and Prejudice especially, just big fan of Mr. Darcy, etc. And then decides to buy this trip to a Jane Austen novel kind of place, Austenland, just a place where you can pretend to be part of a Jane Austen novel and live, dressed like that, doing the same activities that one would do as a woman, for instance. It seems to be that they booked it's mostly for females to book as a vacation. And then also experience a Jane Austen plot, I guess, which is the same thing that happens in the original novel. The difference is that in this case, Jane doesn't buy the trip herself. It is purchased for her by someone who she talked to, who seems to have some insights about her and wants to help her. So that changes things, and this gets a little more into her past romantic life, if you can call it that, and all her relationships that didn't work out, and how she got really into wanting things to be like Pride and Prejudice, for instance, and how real life isn't quite like that. So it's the same basic story. It essentially turns out the same at the end. They've changed a couple of things about some of the characters, but it was charming, which is funny because that's one of the characters' names in the story. But it's a fun rom-com-y. If you like Jane Austen, I really do recommend it before you read this to be familiar with Jane Austen's stories. Even if you haven't read the books, all of them, at least have seen many of the adaptations, especially 1995 Pride and Prejudice, but also a number of the other ones would be good because they're referred to very often. And it might take away from the enjoyment of the book if you don't know what it's referring to, really, I think. But it was just another quick read, another easy, fun read. Of course, not entirely realistic, but also exploring the fact that people who get involved in and who think life would be better if it was like it was in Jane Austen's time. First, I don't actually agree with that. I love reading Jane Austen's novels. I also kind of like reading about the Regency period and certain aspects of it, the poets, etc. But I don't really want to live that life. I don't even want a vacation in that life, really. I can, you know, if I really have a moment, I can think about it in my head, but that's as far as I want it to go. I don't need the whole experience. But I do think it could be a good idea for certain people whose lives, who maybe get too lost in that world, to experience not really a whole plot, to actually experience what it was like to live at that time. Because maybe you would, but I don't know. Is it worth the disillusionment? I don't know. Anyway, I am overthinking, as I tend to do when I'm thinking about different books. But both of these books I would recommend. Austenland was, I think, just in terms of plot, more fun. Obviously, the Mayfair Bookshop was very nice, but I think that I want to read more Mitford related things. But this wasn't probably the best delivery ever, but good, but very good. So I have nothing but pretty good things to say about the reading I've done so far. I have more to do, so I'm going to leave you here. Let me know what you've been reading so far, and if there's anything you recommend in your reading recently. And if you've read any of these, let me know, or either of these, because only two of them. Let me know what you've been thinking, or what you thought about them. And if you like talking about Jane Austen related things, if you like to talk about books and bookshops and tea and historical fiction and classics and cats, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what else I talk about on this channel, then please feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've had a lovely month so far. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day. Bye.